Cool. Man, I love your story being the miracle, the living miracle, helping CEOs and entrepreneurs. I'm so happy to get into this story.
Thank
But
you.
before we do that, I want to know living through this pandemic was quite a thing, sent ripples through our lives. It's still affecting us to this day. How did surviving that time period affect the way that you do work and your outlook on things today?
So it's interesting because the medical crisis that I had took place a year before the pandemic.
Yeah.
So I had an acute aortic dissection. If you're not familiar, is when your heart splits open on along the aorta, and so I had to have immediate and fast surgery to replace the entire upper arch of my aorta. It's about a In most cases, it's about a 2 to 5% survival rate when this happens the way it did. And so I went through that experience a year ahead of the pandemic. So when my actual first day fully back to work was March of 2020, about the time that everybody had been sent home with the pandemic. And so, two things I would say about working through the pandemic. One, I was working for a major healthcare system, so we were in the really front line of everything that was going on and happening. Second, my job specifically was executive communications. And so I was working with our CEO and others in the executive suite to get the messages out both internally and externally. And so that provided a window into a lot of the tip of the spear issues that were happening on any given day.
Yeah.
And third, I would say that the trust transformation, which is the platform that I work through now with CEOs and other leaders, my co-author and I were able to really see the benefit of people taking a greater intentionality about building trust during a time where all of our norms were put at risk. And so we would host just free call-in sessions for anyone that had gone through our program as an opportunity to share and talk about and be transparent and vulnerable about the challenges and issues they were facing. And the big takeaway for me in all of that was a reinforcement of its primary idea that when you are intentional and mindful and engaged with people at a deeper, vulnerable, and active level, you build trust, and that trust becomes the foundation of relationships that help you navigate the very best of situations and, most importantly, through the very worst of situations.
So I'm curious, when did you realize that your heart was
Mm,
doing this? Like, that's such a tricky thing. How did that happen?
dude, it was acute, so it happened immediately, all at once. I here's miracle number one. My wife and I had a typical Friday night. We went to dinner and went to a Home Depot to get my weekend checklist of things to do. We came home, watched a Netflix movie. She ran off to bed. I fell asleep on the couch. And Joe, at 2 in the morning, I wake up with the worst pain I've ever felt. It's like someone punched a hole in my chest and was just squeezing the life out of my heart. And I got up and I ran to the bedroom where my wife was sleeping. I woke her up. I said, "Put your shoes on. We got to get to the emergency room. I'm having a heart attack." And on the way, I have a stroke. So I completely non-responsive at that point. By the time we get to the hospital, I can't do anything. The nurses help Kim get me out of the car, and one of them recognizes that I have no feeling in my arms and legs, which is an indication it's not a heart attack, it's a dissection, and calls for a helicopter, a CT scan, and a surgical team to be on the ready because everything is about time. If they don't get to it fast enough, I'll bleed out. And again, by the grace of God, they got me there on time. The team started doing their work, and 6 hours later, I'm lying in an ICU bed in an induced coma because the prevailing idea was even if I survived, that the after effects and the impact of blood loss and lack of oxygen and everything else would probably leave me in a state where I would require care. So it wasn't something that had a lot of lead up to it. I didn't have a lot of the indicators. As we've looked back on it, there it was sort of the prevailing idea now is that it's like a perfect storm of things. being a little overweight, having high blood pressure, but not ever at the point where I got medicated for it. I have sleep apnea. I wasn't adhering to the protocol of wearing the mask at night when I slept. That's a big one because the impact of not breathing and your heart skipping a beat and things like that. Um, and in retrospect too, I was carrying around a lot of frustration and anger with just kind of general things going on in the job. That I look at that stress as a big impact too. So, not a lot of warning. In fact, no warning. Instant pain and just getting to, just getting there, getting to the hospital as fast as we could were the difference makers.
I understand in this scenario the miracle of it, but there has to be a level of you that had strength and there were seeds that were planted into you early on. Because when you're in that situation, you're going to fight. You have to fight. You're in that
Yeah.
mode. What were those foundational elements of integrity and strength and grit that were put into you that led to this moment where you were on the doorstep?
Yeah, I love that question because one of the comments I've received in this second life that I have was from the CEO of the hospital where I was taken care of, and I've since worked with him on a couple of things. And his comment to me when we first met, and I was just kind of thanking him for taking care of my family and everyone else during it, was it was that he had not seen anybody fight to live as hard as I did. And you don't think about it in the moment
Yeah.
because you're just, you know, you're not conscious of certain things, but your subconscious is at work. I would credit some of it to just doing hard things as part of my routine. I have a fifth degree black belt in Taekwondo and a master certification, and was very active in teaching and training and competing at some level in that front. Well, my daughter and I were consistently at training at a boxing gym. So just being a fighter by training, in some sense, has that. The flip side of it too is my faith and having um, a lot of integrity in the way you deal with things matters. My wife stands firm by the idea, as she was praying and reading and looking for support coming on the scripture that, you know, when Moses is standing at the Red Sea and God tells him, just be still, I'm fighting for you
Yeah.
in all of this, and knowing that's happening. And you know, when I woke up and realized the thousands of people praying as a result of email and posts on Facebook or Instagram or wherever, they were intervening on my behalf too. So I look at the strength that came from the people that poured into me, on the physical, spiritual, and mental side of life.
I remember that Buffalo Bills player that passed out and had cardiac arrest on the
Yeah,
field,
yeah,
Hamlin. And I
yeah,
think about that, the amount of good energy that was put out in just seconds that
yeah.
everybody was concerned. That place, you've never seen a football stadium because that was a big game that was
Oh,
totally
huge,
quiet.
huge. Yeah, no, it's, you know, from time to time, you know, the benefit of the time that we live in now is everything that's done is done and recorded, right? So
Yeah.
there'll be times perhaps at the anniversary of things, and I'll go back and read the posts on Facebook and just again the hundreds of people that were involved
Yeah.
in my in my issue, and people that I knew or didn't know or otherwise were there, and it's overwhelming to see when it works well and people are on your side.
Yeah.
That was such a blessing.
I remember being a big fan of David Letterman growing up, and he was
Mm.
always just this stage guy. And
Yeah,
you never got to see behind the curtain. But when he had that heart attack and brought his doctor on, and
yeah.
he really like almost he got pretty emotional a few times and was just thanking everybody. There's a level of that that will humanize and
Mm.
reset some level of odometer on your life journey.
Yeah, when you confront your mortality and you realize the fragility of life in the scheme of things, it changes everything. You
Yeah.
know, I carry a coin around with me every day that that has the Marcus Aurelius quotes that you could leave this life at any moment. Recognizing that I've been given a second chance. There's no time to waste. I gotta pour it all into every day, and get to as many people as I can with whatever positive message or vibe I've been given to provide that day, and don't waste any time in the midst of that.
Yeah, for sure. So let's go back to your childhood. What did you want to be when you grew up? What was your dream?
Oh man, it all depends on the age, right? My parents love to tell the story of being 5 years old and having two aspirations. One, to be a fry cook at McDonald's because that was my favorite thing to eat,
Uh-huh.
and two, to be a garbage man because those were the guys that I saw every morning at the house, and I would walk outside and talk to them and think, man, these are the coolest, nicest people I know right
Yeah,
now.
that's
Uh,
cool.
yeah, it's always fun to think about, and over time it evolved. I think that I would look at probably the age of middle school, end elementary school, thinking about the ideas and how you work with people.
Yeah.
The I was always I developed communication skills early. I had the opportunity to present and do things and be a part of whether it was drama or singing at church or things like that, or to get in front of people and communicate. And that carried with me through high school and then college, um, and then my in my senior year of college, I had the opportunity to serve the student body by being very involved in student government and some other things, and then gaining a platform and recognizing that really good communications can take any idea much farther than perhaps it would go otherwise. And so that's where I've been for all of my career is in that communication space, and transitioning that now into coaching and training has been a blessing.
So let's simplify a little bit what you do right now in current day 2024. If I put you in front of a bunch of grade school kids, third graders at career day, and one of the kids in the room was like, "Hey, what do you do for a living?"
Yeah.
What's your
Yeah.
answer?
I'm a coach and trainer for business leaders, and so it's like you see on television when you're watching sports on any given day. Every great performer, all the greatest performers, had coaches and trainers with them all the way through their career. It's a shame in business we don't always approach it with that mentality, but those who do bring in people that can really help them perform better personally and professionally. My work covers both sides of that equation. That if we're good at home, we'll be better at work in everything that we do. And so that's what I help people do.
So, who's been that hero for you? Whether this kind of level of mortality, the miracle that you went through, your career, overall, who's been that bedrock inspiration for you to be who you are today?
Well, that's a great question. Certainly I was the beneficiary of two parents who poured into me at such a high level for both a work ethic and faith in the walk that I had. I would say as I got older, there are some that I would look at as very obvious answers, and maybe some that aren't so obvious. So I had the opportunity in college to be part of a group that did orientation for the incoming freshmen. And the gentleman that led that group, Jimmy Farrell, had been a mainstay at the college since its inception. I went to the University of Central Florida, very young university, founded in the late 60s. So when I attended there in the early 80s, a lot of the founding people were still there, Jimmy being one of them. And what Jimmy instilled in us as students was, because we were there at the time we were, the things we were doing and the things we would invest in doing, we wouldn't benefit from it, but generations to follow us would benefit from that. So whether it was the work we were doing at orientation or in student government, looking to help find funding for certain things or create new programs for certain things, those are now fully in effect. 40 years later that we didn't necessarily get to see the benefit of. I believe that that model of signing on for something bigger than yourself that maybe you won't benefit from, but generations that follow will, is an important driver for modeling that kind of approach to helping people be the very best that they can be.
So, what revelation did you get following this miracle and being back and getting healthy again? How did you change your life? What were the top things that rose to the top that made you change from what you were doing before?
Yes. Oh man. There's there's a long list.
Yeah.
I'll hit
Sure.
on I'll hit on the highlights. First and foremost, I mentioned earlier that in honest reflection, there were just some things that I had really become frustrated with and maybe angry about in life. That's the first thing is you got to let go, and you can't let you can't take the things personally that may be happening around you. And you can only control the things that are within your purview to do so, beginning with your attitude. That may be the only thing you can control on any given day. So dive into that.
Yeah.
Second, in as I was reflecting on my relationships, I had felt very strongly that I was very good at that. And most people would say it looked to be that way, but this gave me an opportunity to look a little bit deeper and really unpack some things that where I had gotten it wrong and wasn't operating at that highest level, and recognizing too that there were some places in my life where I had allowed myself to be isolated. And we are always subject to our worst decision making systems when we isolate ourselves and don't have that accountability built into life. And so I now am much more engaged with people at all levels for making good decisions. I know it's always up to me in the end to choose to do that, but getting that right counsel, mentorship, and input is critical. And the last thing I would say is being consistent with the routines that pour into my integrity has become the most important thing I do every day. So I'm up at 4 or 5 o'clock every morning. I am praying, I am reading, I am meditating, and then I'm doing some deep work contribution to what's most important in the things that I'm going to be called to do that day, right out of the gate. And that sets a programming for consistency that allows me to show up at my best for the people that I've been called to engage with.
Talk to me about your book. Let's get into it a little bit.
Appreciate that. I started a journey in 2007 to help people understand. At the time, I was a partner at a PR firm. Help people understand that the output and the outcome of our communications with others should always be to increase trust. And the enlightenment came at really finding a way to help people understand how trust works in at a more granular level. You know, trust is one of those words like love that we get thrown around a lot, and then but you have to ask the question, what's it really mean, right? If I say I trust my wife and I trust my plumber, is it the same? There are some aspects that are the same, but they're very different and they're rooted in different ideas. And so the trust transformation is started as a training program that I worked with Advent Health and launched in 2017. That more than 7,000 people have gone through this program. But the idea was if you can break trust into smaller parts, if you can provide people with a way to look at it in those small parts that let them better diagnose the condition of trust, what needs to be addressed, perhaps what is it that gets you off on the right foot with a new relationship, and how do you create a level of expectation first within yourself to do the right things, and then an expectation with others so that you're allowing them to see, grow, and thrive in high trust relationships. Everything improves
Yeah.
when you improve your relationships. And so that's really the core idea, is to have a greater sense of intentionality with it, to build that trust from the inside out, to take responsibility for your relationships, to keep that promise that you make to someone, but also communicate consistently because as human beings, we're flawed, we're going to fail, we're going to miss the mark. And as long as we're managing expectations, we have an opportunity to fix it. And just to be a good steward with that trust once it's been given to you.
So, of all of these things that you've done in your life and accomplished and evolved into, what are you the proudest of?
Well, I married up, way up. I have an amazing wife who has, at this stage in life, taken on her second career as a licensed mental health counselor. We have four amazing kids who are all pursuing what they've set out to dream and do, and I'm proud of each one of them. I will say that the work I'm doing today is a culmination of an incredible 35-year journey that so many people have been generous with me along the way that now I have that opportunity to do that with others. Seeing the book's title is very intentional because I get to see every day the transformation in people's lives that occur when they adopt the principles and ideas that we talk about in the book. Everything from individuals that have gone through the training program when we launched it at the hospital, telling me stories about improving their personal lives with their husbands or wives or their children, and how that allows them to live a much more fulfilled life when they show up at work every day, to the small hospital in Central Florida that we trained a few years ago, that when we went in there, they were failing. You know, they had the lowest scores in patient satisfaction. They had the lowest and the worst performance as it related to hospital-based infections, and within a year had flipped both those numbers to be one of the higher performing hospitals in both of those categories. And so these are things that are measurable. These are things that matter, and these are things that have ripple effects across personal and professional lives.
Yeah. So, at the end of the day, everyone, Roy, has a perception of you: family, friends, clients, colleagues, everyone that reads your book, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Whew, man, that's a high accountability, brother.
Yeah, that's the therapy question.
I I am a child of God. I am somebody who has been given a lot of opportunity. I've been given a gift, an incredible gift to live a second life, and I am striving every day to live up to that responsibility.
Yeah.
And my hope is that I can reach as many people as possible over the next few years in whatever life I have left, to live the opportunity that they have in front of them when they pour themselves into the idea of trust.
Well said. So, if anyone wants to pick up your book, they want to hire you, reach out, how
Yep.
do they do that?
Two ways I would tell them. First, if you go to the trusttransformation.com and share your email with me, you'll also we'll send you to where you can buy the book. But we'll have your contact information. And once you're signed in there, I can reach out to you there. Or they're welcome to send me an email, roy@roywreid.com.
Okay, excellent. Roy, this has been an honor and a pleasure. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
I appreciate the time. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
you bet. Thank you.